Hi everyone, and welcome to today's video, where we explore the inspiring journey of one of history's greatest thinkers, Albert Einstein. In this series, we're not just learning English. We're learning life lessons from a man whose ideas changed the world forever. As you listen, try to absorb new vocabulary and expressions while also understanding the deeper message behind his story. This is more than a biography. It's a reminder that curiosity, patience, and determination can transform an ordinary life into an extraordinary one. So sit back, get your notebook ready, and let's step into the early world of young Albert Einstein, long before he became a global icon. Albert Einstein entered the world on March 14th, 1879, in a quiet German town called Ulm. His parents, Hermann Einstein and Pauline Koch, lived simple lives. Hermann worked with electrical equipment, while Pauline devoted herself to home and music. Nothing about Albert's birth seemed unusual, except one tiny detail that worried his family. His head looked slightly larger than normal, and relatives joked gently about it, unsure of what kind of child he would grow up to be. None of them knew that this odd little boy, with his big, curious eyes and calm nature, would eventually reshape how humanity understands the universe. Albert was not like other toddlers. In fact, he didn't speak clearly until he was almost 3 years old. His parents grew concerned, wondering if something might be wrong. They even gave him a little nickname, the Quiet One, because he hardly talked, even when other children around him were running, laughing, and shouting. But Albert's silence wasn't due to a lack of intelligence. Instead, it came from deep thoughtfulness. Unlike most kids who bounce from toy to toy, Albert spent long moments staring at objects around him, as though he were trying to decode hidden secrets inside them. When he turned 5, something magical happened, something that would awaken his lifelong love of scientific mystery. His father handed him a small gift, a simple compass. To young Albert, it was nothing short of astonishing. No matter how he turned it, the needle always pointed in the same direction, pulled by an invisible force he couldn't see. He spent hours examining it, turning it slowly, watching the needle swing back to its original position. That small compass sparked a powerful realization inside him. The world was filled with forces and truths that eyes alone could not detect. He later said the experience left one of the deepest impressions of his childhood. School, however, was a completely different story. The strict, memorization-based system didn't suit Albert at all. Teachers expected students to follow instructions quietly, but Albert wanted to ask why. A question many teachers found annoying. Some even believed he wouldn't accomplish anything meaningful. One frustrated teacher famously told him he would never amount to anything. That kind of criticism would break many children, but Albert carried on, focusing more on understanding than on trying to impress anyone. Despite struggling with languages and certain subjects, he found pure joy in mathematics. Numbers made sense to him in ways nothing else did. To him, math felt like a secret language that explained how the entire universe worked. His mother encouraged his love for music by guiding him to learn the violin, while his uncle Jacob added fun and creativity to his math lessons. Jacob often compared math problems to treasure hunts, each clue bringing Albert closer to a hidden solution. These early influences shaped his unique thinking style, teaching him to explore ideas rather than simply memorize lessons. Albert wasn't interested in games or typical childhood activities. Instead, he drowned himself in books and imagined scenarios that no other child thought about. One famous question that struck him at a young age was, what would it feel like to chase a beam of light? This single thought marked the beginning of his lifelong journey to understand light, motion, and time. But how did these early struggles shape Einstein's future, and what challenges push him to grow even further? As Albert grew older, life began to move in unexpected directions. At age 15, his father's business collapsed, forcing the Einstein family to move from Germany to Italy. Albert, however, stayed behind to finish his schooling, a decision that quickly turned into misery. He felt trapped in a rigid education system that discouraged creativity and punished curiosity. The strict teachers, the heavy rules, and the old-fashioned teaching methods made him feel more like a prisoner than a student. Eventually, the pressure became too much. Albert made a bold decision. He left school before graduating. Many people around him thought this choice would ruin his future, but Albert believed otherwise. For him, true learning wasn't limited to classrooms. It lived in books, ideas, and questions that no exam could measure. While in Italy with his family, Albert spent months studying independently. He devoured textbooks on physics, mathematics, and philosophy with a hunger that surprised everyone. This period of self-learning shaped his mind in powerful ways, teaching him discipline, focus, and independence. At 16, he even wrote his first scientific paper, a clear sign of how far his curiosity had already carried him. Confident but still realistic, Albert applied to the prestigious Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich. Unfortunately, he failed the entrance exam. His math and science scores were excellent, but he struggled with non-science subjects like French and history, which caused his overall score to drop. But once again, failure only fueled him. Rather than giving up, Albert promised himself he would return stronger. That a year later, he tried again and succeeded. At 17, Einstein officially joined the Polytechnic School, excited to begin his academic journey. But the challenges didn't stop there. Though he loved physics and mathematics deeply, he showed little interest in subjects he found unnecessary. He skipped classes he found boring and studied on his own terms. His professors often complained about his independent habits, saying he lacked discipline and respect for formal instruction. One professor even warned other staff members not to hire him in the future. But Albert's mind worked differently. He wasn't rebelling to cause trouble. He simply preferred exploring deeper scientific questions rather than memorizing lecture notes. During his studies, Albert met a brilliant classmate named Mileva Merrick, the only woman in their physics program. She was sharp, hardworking, and deeply passionate about science. Their shared curiosity brought them close, and soon their friendship transformed into love. Many evenings, they sat together discussing theories, solving problems, and inspiring each other's ideas. Mileva's presence played a significant role in Albert's intellectual growth, giving him someone who not only understood his vision, but challenged him to think even bigger. Despite this emotional support, life wasn't easy. Albert came from a modest family, and financial pressure constantly weighed on him. After graduating in 1900, he expected to find work quickly. Instead, the opposite happened. His professors, unhappy with his unconventional attitude, refused to give him strong recommendations. As a result, job applications came back rejected again and again. For almost 2 years, Albert searched desperately for a position in teaching or research, but failed each time. Imagine studying for years, dreaming of becoming a physicist, only to be told repeatedly that no one wants to hire you. It was a heavy blow, but fate had its own timing. In 1902, after endless disappointments, Albert finally got a simple job at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, not as a scientist, but as a technical clerk. The work had nothing to do with physics, but it offered stability. More importantly, it gave Albert long, quiet hours to think. Little did he know that this modest office would become the birthplace of ideas that would revolutionize the world. What happened next in this ordinary office that turned Einstein into a global scientific legend? Working at the Swiss Patent Office might have seemed like an ordinary job to most people. But for Albert Einstein, it quietly became the turning point of his life. The office was calm, structured, and far less stressful than the academic world that had once rejected him. Every day, Albert reviewed patent applications, new inventions, mechanical devices, electrical systems. Although the work wasn't glamorous, it exposed him to creative ideas from inventors across Europe. More importantly, it allowed him long, uninterrupted hours to think deeply about the scientific questions that had always lived in his mind. He often called the patent office his thinking laboratory, a place where he could examine the entire universe inside his head while pretending to focus on paperwork. During this time, Albert married Maliva Merrick. Their life together was simple and humble. They lived in a small apartment and managed expenses carefully, relying mostly on Albert's modest salary. Even though they struggled financially, they shared a strong bond built on dreams, curiosity, and endless conversations about science. In 1904, they welcomed their first son, Hans Albert Einstein. Parenthood brought happiness, but it also added more responsibility and pressure on Albert, who still longed for a career in academia. Yet instead of being discouraged, he used his limited free time to work on scientific theories with unmatched dedication. After completing his job each day, Albert would sit at his desk late into the night, scribbling equations, questioning old ideas, and building new concepts inside his notebooks. His determination during these years was extraordinary. He refused to let circumstances decide his future. And then came the year that changed everything. 1905, often called Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, or Miracle Year. At just 26 years old, while still working as a clerk, Albert published 4 groundbreaking scientific papers that shook the entire scientific community. Each paper alone could have made him famous, but together they completely transformed modern physics. The first paper explained the photoelectric effect, proving that light behaves not only as a wave, but also as tiny particles, later called photons. This discovery laid the foundation for quantum theory and eventually earned Einstein the Nobel Prize. The second paper described Brownian motion, offering clear mathematical proof that atoms and molecules truly existed, something scientists had debated for decades. His explanation finally ended the argument. The third paper introduced the special theory of relativity, a bold concept suggesting that time and space are not fixed but relative, changing depending on the speed at which an object moves. This idea challenged everything humanity believed about the universe. And from that theory came the fourth paper, the famous equation E equals mc squared, showing that energy and matter are deeply connected. With this single expression, Einstein revealed a truth so powerful that it would later influence both scientific progress and global events. When these papers were published, scientists were stunned. How could a young man with no university job, working in a small office, produce ideas that overturned centuries of established science? Slowly, the world began to recognize his brilliance. Invitations to academic positions started arriving. Universities that once ignored him now wanted him to join their faculty. After years of rejection, loneliness, and struggle, Albert finally stepped into the spotlight he had long deserved. Yet even as success arrived, Einstein remained humble. He didn't crave attention or wealth. Instead, he kept asking new questions, pushing boundaries, and trying to understand the universe at a deeper level. For him, success was never an ending. It was just another beginning. But how did Einstein handle sudden fame, family challenges, and the responsibilities that came with being a rising scientific star? By the time the world began to acknowledge Albert Einstein as a rising star in physics, his life was already shifting in dramatic ways. In 1909, after years of struggling for recognition, he finally received a university position in Zurich. For the first time, He was teaching full-time and surrounded by students who admired his unconventional thinking. His ideas were now discussed in scientific circles all across Europe, and slowly, Albert's reputation as an innovative mind grew stronger. Despite the praise, he remained deeply modest. He often repeated that he wasn't a genius, just someone who refused to stop asking questions. His humility, combined with his brilliance, made him stand out even more. In 1911, Einstein moved to Prague for another teaching role, and soon after, he returned to Zurich to take up a more prestigious position. Everywhere he went, his theories continued to spark excitement, curiosity, and debate. But with recognition came pressure. Scientists expected him to push the boundaries of physics even further, and the weight of that responsibility often rested heavily on his shoulders. Still, Einstein worked tirelessly. He wasn't chasing fame. He was following his fascination with the universe. In 1914, Einstein accepted an invitation to join the Prussian Academy of Sciences in Berlin. This was one of the greatest honors a scientist could receive at the time. The position gave him freedom to research without teaching duties and access to some of the brightest minds in Germany. It should have been a most peaceful period of his life, but instead, it came with personal and global turmoil. His marriage with Mileva, already strained by years of financial stress and emotional distance, began to crumble. Their differing personalities and Einstein's growing fame created tension that neither of them could repair. By 1919, the couple officially divorced. Despite their separation, Einstein ensured Mileva and their two sons were financially supported, showing his sense of responsibility even through emotional difficulty. While Einstein was dealing with his family's challenges, the world outside was entering chaos. World War I erupted shortly after his arrival in Berlin. Many German scientists strongly supported the war effort, but Einstein refused to do so. His commitment to peace was unwavering. He believed that violence only created more suffering, and he used his voice to advocate for understanding and unity, even when it made him unpopular in scientific and political circles. His stance revealed not just his intelligence, but his compassion and courage. Then, in 1919, Albert Einstein's name exploded across the globe. British astronomers conducted an experiment during a solar eclipse to test a prediction from Einstein's general theory of relativity, a theory he had worked on tirelessly for years. The results confirmed his ideas. Gravity could bend light. This discovery was unlike anything the world had seen before. Overnight, newspapers worldwide printed headlines celebrating Einstein's theory. For the first time in history, a scientist achieved the kind of fame usually reserved for royalty or movie stars. Einstein became a household name. His wild hair, gentle smile, and brilliant mind turned him into a global icon. Yet fame never controlled him. He remained simple in his habits, uninterested in fancy clothes or luxurious lifestyles. Instead, he used his influence to speak for peace, justice, and equality. Even as critics tried to discredit him, he responded with grace, famously saying, "Great spirits often face strong opposition from ordinary minds." But darker days were approaching. Germany was changing rapidly, and Einstein's identity as a Jewish scientist placed him in great danger. In the early 1930s, the rise of the Nazi regime forced him to make one of the hardest decisions of his life. He had to leave his home behind. Where did Einstein go next? And how did his final years reshape his legacy forever? As the 1930s unfolded, the political climate in Germany grew darker and more dangerous, especially for Jewish citizens. Albert Einstein, now one of the most recognized scientists in the world, became a direct target of hatred and propaganda. His books were burned, his theories were dismissed by extremists as un-German, and his safety was no longer guaranteed. Realizing the threat, Einstein made the heartbreaking decision to leave the country he had once called home. In 1933, he sailed to the United States, where he accepted a position at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. Although he found peace and stability there, a part of him always felt the pain of losing his homeland to hatred and violence. In America, Einstein continued his work with the same curiosity that had driven him since childhood. He became a U.S. citizen in 1940 and spent the rest of his life in Princeton, surrounded by fellow researchers who respected his insight and unique way of thinking. But as World War II escalated, Einstein faced a moral dilemma. The scientific community feared that Nazi Germany might develop extremely destructive weapons using nuclear physics. Although Einstein was a lifelong pacifist, he signed a letter urging the U.S. government to consider building an atomic weapon before Germany did. While he played no direct role in the Manhattan Project, his famous equation, E equals mc squared, helped underpin the theoretical foundation for nuclear energy. When the war ended and the world witnessed the devastating bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Einstein felt a deep sense of sorrow. He never intended for science to be used for destruction, and the consequences weighed heavily on his heart. From that point on, he dedicated much of his remaining life to promoting peace, nuclear disarmament, and international cooperation. He reminded the world that science should uplift humanity, not endanger it. His voice became one of wisdom, warning nations that technology without compassion could lead to unimaginable consequences. Despite his global fame, Einstein lived with remarkable simplicity. He refused fancy clothes, rarely cared about his appearance, and often wandered around Princeton wearing mismatched clothing and no socks. When asked why he avoided socks, he simply said that they always got holes, so he stopped wearing them altogether. He enjoyed sailing, even though he wasn't particularly good at it. His colleagues often joked that his curiosity about the universe was far more powerful than his sense of direction on a boat. Even as he aged, Einstein's mind remained sharp and endlessly curious. He spent his later years working on a new idea called the unified field theory, an attempt to combine all the forces of nature into one beautiful mathematical framework. Although he never achieved this final dream, his efforts sparked the imagination of future generations and laid the groundwork for modern scientific exploration. He continued thinking, writing, and questioning until the very last days of his life, that on April 18, 1955, Albert Einstein passed away at the age of 76. His final words, spoken in German, went unheard by the nurse who did not understand the language, fittingly symbolic for a man whose thoughts were often ahead of his time. Yet Einstein's legacy did not end with his final breath. His theories changed physics forever. His courage inspired millions, and his humility reminded the world that greatness does not require perfection. It requires curiosity, persistence, and a genuine desire to understand the universe. Einstein's life teaches us that the most extraordinary people often begin as misunderstood children, quiet thinkers, or dreamers who refuse to give up. His journey shows that obstacles are not barriers, but stepping stones toward discovery. Today, his name represents genius, but his story represents something even greater: the power of believing in your own questions. If you enjoyed this powerful journey and want more inspiring life stories written in this same long format style, just tell me the next personality you want. I'll begin the next chapter for you.